Hi, I'm Lissie.
And I'm Simmons,
We're here to talk to you about stuff.
especially history. We're doing a podcast about history. Hi, we're the Ink Drinkers. Contrary to our name, we don't actually drink ink.
We just drink tea and talk about history.
So join us as we learn about history.
Indeed. So, to start out with, we are going to talk a little bit about the pirate havens.
Mainly the pirate haven of Tortuga, which, if you have heard anything about pirates ever, you most likely have heard about the pirate haven of Tortuga.
Mm-hmm.
So just to start off, Tortuga is Spanish for turtle or tortoise.
That's interesting.
So called because it was on Columbus's original voyage in 1492. He saw the island and it rose up out of the water and it looked like a tortoise shell to him, so he called it Tortuga.
That's an interesting fact. I did not know this.
Yeah, I did tons of research on Tortuga this week. Well, I guess last week. But anyway, it has a rather wild history, Tortuga does.
It does.
Or do you want to talk about the location of Tortuga here?
I'll talk about the location and then we'll dive into the actual history behind it. So, Tortuga, if you think about the Caribbean, you've got Florida up there, you have Cuba just below that, and then you've got, this is an 18th century map I'm looking at, by the way, and then you've got Hispaniola, Puerto Rico, and then you've got all the islands surrounding it. But if you go about, I don't know how many miles downward, towards the Brazilian coast, back then it was the Spanish Main, you've got this tiny little island off the Spanish Main, which is Tortuga. It's very interesting because
it's a very small place.
It's a very tiny island off of the giant Spanish Main.
Mm-hmm. All right, so first off, it was settled back in the 1400s, as I said, with Columbus, by Spanish colonists. And then later, in the early 1600s, the French and English colonists arrived. They were there for a little while until 1629, 4 years. And then they were attacked by the Spanish and kicked out of Tortuga. So then after they kicked the French and English out, most of the Spanish army left Tortuga to kick the French out of Hispaniola.
Mm-hmm.
And while they were gone, the French and English came back to Tortuga and took over again. This happened not once, not twice, not three, but 4 times.
4 times?
4 times. The Spanish come and kick the French and English out. The Spanish leave to go somewhere else. The French and English come right back in again. So the very wild fighting history here in Tortuga. There was constant fighting within Tortuga itself.
That's interesting.
In 1633, slaves were imported, but just 2 years later, by 1635, the use of slaves in Tortuga just ended completely.
Good news.
Yeah, good news.
It says, according to her notes, that they left because the island was too small to be of importance, which
Yes.
I can see from the map.
If you compare it to Hispaniola, yes, very much so. In 1640, this all is taking place within the span of like 20 years that they're all bumping each other out of Tortuga. French and Dutch kicked the Spanish out in 1640, and at this point, the buccaneers in Tortuga, the pirates in Tortuga, are calling themselves Brethren of the Coast.
Brethren of the Coast.
It's such a piratey name.
Actually, to me, it sounds more like it's like a church name.
Really?
We are the Brethren of the Coast.
It does.
Let
too.
us pray, my brothers.
That's hilarious. So the pirates in Tortuga are also mostly made up of French, English, and Dutch. My phone keeps buzzing.
Mine
My
does
mother
too,
is
so.
texting me. In 1655, some bloke by the name of Elias Watts, who I have not researched yet, becomes governor of Jamaica and Tortuga. And then in 1660, England appoints a Frenchman. I don't know why they did this.
Why?
Jeremy Deschamps, governor of Tortuga.
That was a bad idea.
It really was, because Jeremy then proceeded to kick all the English out of Tortuga.
So a very, very bad idea.
A very bad idea. Why did they do that? I have no idea. Then around this time, the Buccaneers, there wasn't much pirating to do, and it wasn't very profitable for them. So they turned from pirating to logwood cutting, because there was a lot of logwood in Tortuga, which is rather humorous, I think. And then in 1684, peace arose between France and Spain, and there were no more Buccaneers in Tortuga because they signed a thing that said that there couldn't be pirates anymore.
That's
At least legal pirates, yeah.
at least legal pirates.
And then Spain gave up Tortuga to France in 1697. That is the brief but wild history of Tortuga.
That is, wow.
It's very wild.
That is very interesting. I, by the way, had no idea about any of this history. I was just...
We did separate research, and she learned about different things than
I learned about different pirates, and she learned about all sorts of other things.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Tortuga was a giant pirate haven for a while, it seemed.
Mm-hmm.
Like, probably not very long, since this is all, like,
This is like
30.
50 years of history.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was still a pirate haven. Pirates came and went. And even according to my research, they still went in and out of Tortuga for a while, which is interesting, now that I know that pirates weren't allowed to be there.
Yeah.
I mean, generally they weren't allowed to be anywhere, but...
Yeah, like Spanish waters, I think it was either Spanish or French or English. I think it was actually English. Ships were considered outlaws if they didn't have an English flag as of 1697. And so pirate ships didn't have English flags, I guess. So
That's interesting.
yeah.
I read something about the guy who made the Jolly Roger. Off topic, but it's about flags.
Oh,
I can't remember. But he was like the first mate of, was it Blackbeard?
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah.
Do we want to talk about letters of marque first, or one of the pirates?
Let's go ahead with the letters of marque, because...
It's kind of pertinent.
Yeah, it is very pertinent, actually.
Okay, so last month we were discussing pirates, and we came across something that we didn't know about before, letters of marque. And I had been, in books I have read before, I've seen the word privateer come up, and I never knew what it meant. So in my researchings, I discovered this. A letter of marque is a government license authorizing the bearer to engage in privateering or pirating. Ships captured by these privateers were subject to prize law, and prize law was basically just who gets the... Let's see, I'll read this actually. An enemy ship may be seized by a party in conflict, where ships could be sunk, while private merchant vessels should be taken to friendly ports for adjudication by a prize court. Coastal fishing vessels have the right not to be seized while engaged in trade. I thought that was interesting. So this is with, like, legal pirating. So basically, a ruler of a country, we'll see this later, I'm sure, with some of the pirates that we'll be talking about, but a ruler of a country will give this letter of marque to a sailor, and that basically authorizes them to raid enemy ships.
I found that interesting when we did that, because we were a part of a reenacting group, and we were talking about letters of marque a little bit, and how there were actually some on-land privateers during the Revolutionary War as well, and so we thought,
yeah,
that...
I haven't researched into the on-land privateering yet, but so letters of marque are issued on a per-voyage basis, which I actually thought was interesting too. In the colonies during the Revolutionary War, thank you, they were issued by the Continental Congress and state governments.
Interesting.
I'm reading some quotes from websites that I found. I was taking my most of my research about this from Cornell Law School's website. I don't know why they had something about letters of marque, but although letters of marque only authorize the holder to attack ships belonging to hostile nations, many privateers also engaged in piracy, attacking neutral and allied shipping. So they were also illegal pirates. Especially this happened when peace broke out, and privateers were expected to return to normal commerce, which it's got to be hard to adjust from pirating to
Privateering.
yeah. Also, here it says privateering saw a decline in use in the mid-19th century. Makes sense as things are getting more.
I mean, there's still
industrial
still pirates these days, but not legal pirates generally, unless you're a hacker.
In fact, even the 1856 Paris Declaration respecting maritime law banned the practice of privateering altogether. However, the United States of America didn't sign the Paris Declaration respecting maritime law of 1856, and America still retains the right to issue letters of marque. So that is all of the notes that I had about letters of marque.
Very interesting thing about letters of marque. Never knew they existed until we started looking into pirates.
Yeah, we were also reading about who was it? Was it Francis Drake? I think it was Francis Drake. That when he returned from being a pirate with his letter of marque, I guess a privateer with his letter of marque, he was praised by the public for being a hero. Like, the holders of letters of marque were very much respected for some reason.
Yeah, I mean, Sir Francis Drake was, like, he was a big person in the world of England. Like, everyone knew Sir Francis Drake, especially the Queen. It is said that he is the Queen's favorite pirate.
This is Queen...
So to see. Queen Elizabeth I.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah, I think it's the first.
Do you want to start talking about one of the pirates that you were looking up about? I'm going to read what my mom was texting me real quick.
All right. So, in the past couple of weeks, I have been researching pirates, just normal pirates. What did they do? What did they not do? And the pirate that kept coming up through my research, in fact, every single book I have read, includes one very famous pirate. You may have seen him in Pirates of the Caribbean. His name is Edward Teach.
I have no
also
idea.
known as Blackbeard.
See, that's the name that I know.
Many know him as Blackbeard because that's the nickname that he was given because his beard was black. I mean, there's more reasons to it, but his birth name was Edward Teach.
Edward Teach.
And
was he a teacher?
No, no, actually, there's a couple books like that mix it up and call him Thatch. I don't know why. It's interesting. Yeah, so Blackbeard is an interesting person. He started out in his hometown of Bristol, and then he sailed for Jamaica with some privateers in the late French War. He was often noted in that point of time before he became a pirate for his, quote, uncommon boldness and personal courage, unquote. It was very interesting. But in the year 1716, he fell in with a pirate by the name of Captain Benjamin Hornigold. Hornigold. And he is one of those pirates that went from being a pirate to retiring. He got pardoned by the governor of South Carolina. Not a good governor, by the way. And Blackbeard was the first mate of Captain Hornigold's fleet. Before Hornigold retired, they captured a ship, and Hornigold gave Blackbeard command of this ship that they'd captured, and Blackbeard renamed the ship to the Queen Anne's Revenge. Aboard this ship, when it was captured, were mounted 40 guns. Like, not pistols or shotguns or muskets or anything. Cannons. And I'm guessing they were the average ship cannon, which would probably be about 24-pounders, 1824. Even at this point, in late 1776, early 1717, he was still decent. He wasn't known for any violent anythings. And he went around, did pirate things,
Yeah.
Captured ships.
Killed people.
Did pirate things. He started getting his rise in popularity as a pirate, however, because he grew out his beard to, as my book here has said, a ridiculous length. Like, it was pretty long, considering he's a pirate and doing piratey things. But he would also braid his hair and stick at the end of it matches or cigars or something that would smoke. His eyes were already wild looking. So you add this smoke and this weird looking braided beard. It was before the Carolinas, before he sailed to the Carolinas, that he got notorious because, hold on, I lost my place. Because he took a vessel, he burned this vessel after they plundered, because this vessel had come from Boston, and in Boston, there had been some pirates who had been convicted and sentenced to death. And so Blackbeard decided to, quote, enact revenge upon this sloop. So he took the crew, dumped them on the nearest island, Jamaica, it seems, and burned their ship. And then Blackbeard sailed towards the Carolinas. And along the way, he needed medicine because, I mean, you've got a bunch of pirates, they're attacking ships, they're probably getting wounded. They'll need some form of medicine sometime. And so he went ashore in Charlestown, demanded his medicine, and he got about 1,500 pounds of sterling, and then the medicine chest was valued between 300 and 400 British pounds. Like, that's probably a lot more in today's money, but from Charlestown, they sailed to North Carolina in Captain Blackbeard's man of war. He grounded his ship, and he went to the governor of North Carolina. And this is where things get a little strange. The governor of North Carolina, you think of governors and you think, oh, they're trying to protect the people, you know? Mm-hmm. The people were frightened of pirates, and the governor made a deal with Blackbeard, who by this time is known as a notorious pirate, known for plundering, killing, and other such things. Yeah, they hid inside their homes anytime they saw the pirates walking throughout the streets, which they were given free leave to do because this governor was promised some share of every loot that Blackbeard got. He was not a favorite of the people. Yeah. In fact, he was so much not a favorite of the people that there was a man who got up the courage to round up some men and go to the governor of Virginia and plead for him to come help them out and kill Blackbeard, please.
Oh, come on. Wow, yeah.
Which was a good idea. I mean, at this point, Blackbeard needs to die. I know that sounds horrible.
Yeah, but at the point that you had to go to a different governor to...
Mm-hmm. So these guys, they enlist the help of the Virginia governor, and they send out a privateer. The governor of Virginia sent his lieutenant, who was commander of a few sloops, and a couple of men of war, the Pearl and the Lime. Lime is an interesting name.
Yeah, when you have Queen Anne's Revenge.
Yeah, but there are some British ships that we learned, like, a couple years ago that were named things like the Unicorn and the Rainbow. And they were British, like, warships. It was ridiculous.
Yeah.
Anyway, but this lieutenant's name is Robert Maynard. He was the first lieutenant of the Pearl, but he was put in charge of the whole expedition. Mm-hmm. And he set out for the area that Blackbeard was in. And it gets interesting because they tried to do this thing with all secrecy. No one had to know. Nobody. Mm-hmm. Like, if anyone knew, the whole operation was just horrible. Mm-hmm. Blackbeard got reports, and he did about nothing about it.
Huh.
Like, he heard reports, but he went about in his normal life. And he wasn't convinced until he saw the sloops, and he put his vessel in a posture of defense, to defend himself, sort of thing. But once he was prepared for battle, the alehouse called to him, and he went ashore and drank himself into oblivion.
So, did his ship get destroyed?
No.
No?
No. He went back to his ship drunk, and that's probably where he would have failed, where his failure came in. Because if he probably hadn't have drunk, he would have been able to come up with something, but he went and got drunk. And so there's this huge battle. Blackbeard runs off, and then he gets run aground on a sandbar. So he's stuck on this sandbar, and the lieutenant had run up his British colors, his flag. There is some dialogue with some words. And for the last of the words, Blackbeard, quote, took a glass of liquor and drank to him with the words, quote, damnation seize my soul if I give you quarters or take any from you, unquote.
Wow.
He was
adamant.
He was adamant, and the liquor probably didn't help. By this time, him and Lieutenant Maynard, had finished their discussion, yeah. Several of Lieutenant Maynard's sloops were rowing towards Blackbeard's ship. The lieutenant sloop was hit, and a lot of his men were killed and wounded after Blackbeard fired a shot of cannon at them. It seems that Blackbeard would have gotten away, except there was no wind.
Oh, that's not great for sailing ships.
Nope. And while he probably had oars, that would have been too hard and taken away too many men.
Yeah.
So Blackbeard tried to get away, but Lieutenant Maynard got onto the deck. There was a big battle. It took 25 wounds to take Blackbeard down.
Oh my goodness.
He was very adamant about not dying.
Oh yeah. This sounds like Horatio Nelson a little bit. Except for he wasn't a pirate. But.
And so he passed that way. And it's very interesting because the book I'm reading, written by Captain Charles Johnson, mentions that should Blackbeard have put his skills to good use, he would have been a hero in that world. Instead, he became a feared, notorious pirate that got what he deserved, basically.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna...
Because of his alliance, you're saying he would have been, or with the governor, he would have been considered a hero?
If he would have used it for good, yeah. But he didn't.
No. He's a pirate. He's Blackbeard.
And he got what he deserved. And in the end, his crewmates were all strung, generally, except for one or two, because one of them was already dying, so.
Yeah.
And then the other one got pardoned. I forget why, but it was a legitimate reason. Yeah, Blackbeard was a pretty interesting dude.
It sounds like there's like very good reason that he is very famous. Like not good reasons, but bad reasons.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's Blackbeard.
That is Blackbeard.
Wow. Now I know about Blackbeard. I was writing down notes you probably heard on the microphone. Sorry about that. Well, Felicity was talking about Blackbeard because I never knew any of this. Shall we talk about Jean-Francios Roberval?
Sure.
All right.
He's a pretty interesting guy, folks.
He's a very interesting guy, yes. So he was raised in France. This is Jean-Francios Roberval. He was raised in France. I forgot to write down any dates. I will look up real quickly when he was born, because that might be nice to know. He was born in 1495.
1495.
Yes, indeed. So he was from a French noble family, and his father, Bernard, was friends with he was friends when he was prince, but later became King Francois d'Aguillemé. I don't know.
We're not French. We don't know how to pronounce this stuff.
But Jean-Francois was sent by King Francois I to start a Catholic colony in Canada, which is interesting because...
Very specific.
Yeah. Jean-Francois was a Protestant, and his whole family was Protestant. But nobody's quite sure why he was sent by a Catholic king to start a Catholic colony. The king sent him with 45,000 livres. I also didn't look up how to pronounce that. 1 livre equals 1 pound of silver sterling, which is about $1.25 back then.
Oh, wow.
So nowadays that's a lot of money, but still that's not enough to quite go. I had it written down here. It's about 56,000 $820.
Almost 57.
Almost $57,000, but still, that's not a whole lot for all the supplies that you need.
Yeah.
And he soon discovered that he didn't have enough supplies. So before he left, I will talk about in a moment that he turned to pirating. Actually, I'll talk about that right now. I'll just highlight this so I don't forget. To make ends meet, to get enough money for his crossing over to Canada, Roberval became a pirate, and it got so that even the English ambassador complained to Francois I about Roberval's seizing British ships amidst his pirating. And so the king pretends to be very angry with Roberval, but really was not very angry with Roberval about the pirating. So on his voyage, after all this pirating, mostly his crew was gentlemen and gentlewomen and criminals. Because, I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, this is how Australia was started, right? Because there's so many extra people just rotting in prison that you might as well use them for something. Like sending them off to a far land where you don't know if they're going to come back or not. You don't care. So, gentlemen and criminals. And so he leaves in 1542, and it took him 2 months from April until June to get to Canada. And Jacques Cartier was his guide. I think he comes into the story a little bit later. I might not have written down about that because it wasn't so big. But Jacques Cartier was his guide, and he left in 1541. And then when Roberval left in 42, they met at Newfoundland.
Interesting.
In June. And then Cartier returned home with a fair amount of his crew, despite Roberval's orders to stay there. So they started the colony, and Roberval was a firm ruler of his colony. Somebody said, quote, Captain Roberval was very cruel in dealing with his men, forcing them to work. Otherwise, they were deprived of food and drink. If anyone failed his duty, Roberval had him punished. One day he had 6 of them hanged, and some of them he ordered to be banished to an island in leg iron, because they had been caught in petty theft involving not more than 5 sous. I did not look how much sous is. Do you want to do that?
Yep.
Sure, thank you. Others, both men and women, were flogged for the same offense.
Souls? Right, souls.
Yes.
Whatever it is. Is what the livre was divided into.
Okay.
So it's money.
Yeah. So they were caught, and some were hanged and some were banished for petty thefts involving not more than 5 sous. Others, both men and women, were flogged for the same offense. Now, this sounds pretty rough, but we do need to keep in mind that his colony consisted mainly of criminals, which he probably had to keep in line quite a bit. But he did exercise his right of pardon in 1542 to, I don't know how to pronounce his name, but some bloke, Acilien de Siroustang, for the murder of a sailor. And his letter of pardon is actually the oldest dated official Canadian document. This was on September 9th, 1542. It would be neat. Oh, it's probably in French, but it would be neat to read it.
It would.
In 1540, it was a short-lasted colony, though, because in 1543, everyone left and returned to England. Part of the reason for this expedition also was collecting precious stones and gold. Of course, that's normally what colonies are for, is to make more money for the...
Generally.
He was sent to also gather precious stones and gold, which he did, but it turned out that none of the precious stones or gold gathered in the Canadian colony turned out to be precious stones or gold. They were, like, what's that stuff called? Iron pyrite?
I think so.
Yeah.
And pyrite. Close enough to pirate.
Yeah.
I wonder why.
I wonder why. So a saying arose in France after that like, as fake as Canadian diamonds, because all the diamonds turned out.
Your tone is as fake as Canadian diamonds.
Yes. The Canadian expedition, go figure, ruined Roberval because, what with his lack of supplies and turning to pirating, and he was sent to establish a Catholicism while he was a Protestant, and he had not a great crew with gentlemen and criminals, and not very useful. And also the fact that none of the precious jewels and stuff that he picked up were precious jewels. So there was a lot of suing going around. I didn't write down who he was suing, but he lost the case, and I think Jacques Cartier the guide who returned to England won the case and got more money out of the deal. So
Wow.
poor Roberval is just not very...
He's just broke.
He's just broke. This is when, in the other article that we were reading before, last month, it mentioned that he had turned to Protestantism, like, after he returned. So this might have been what he was talking about, that, like, this is when he became really involved with Protestantism.
Yeah.
And in 1560, when he was leaving a Protestant Calvinist meeting with some
Calvinist?
other... Yeah, apparently, I wrote it down, fun fact, he was a Calvinist, which probably 90% of the Protestants back then were Calvinist, but...
Probably.
He was attacked on his way out of the meeting with other Protestants and killed.
That's sad.
And all of his few fortunes went to his creditors, and I think his nephew as well. But here's a little fun story that sounds very piratey that I came across while researching this dude. He had a relative, Marguerite de la Roche de Roberval, very long name, and she tagged along with him to Canada. And there are some conflicting stories about this, but she came with him, and he marooned her on an island. Some people say that it was just... he was a mean guy and decided to maroon this poor, helpless woman. Others say, which seems to be the case, that she took a lover on this ship that Roberval didn't like, and he left the two of them.
Well, if it was a really bad criminal, I can see why.
So he marooned the two of them on an island on his voyage, and I have not been able to find what happened to her after that. They have started a colony. She may have died.
She just kapoofed, like Daniel Montparnasse. That's interesting.
Yes, that's the story of Jean-Francios Roberval. We were commenting on this last week. Again, we did a practiced episode just for fun. We were comparing the two, or like the different kinds of pirates, per se. Like you have Blackbeard.
Blackbeard. Yep.
Just like a notorious guy from start to finish.
Oh, yeah.
And then you have Roberval, who turned to pirating because the king didn't give him sufficient supplies.
Because he was forced to.
Pretty much, yeah.
He was an illegal legal pirate, as I like to say.
Yes. So that's something that we found interesting last time is, like, you have the two opposite extremes, and some
You
people
have the good guys who had to, and then the bad guys who wanted to.
Yeah.
For bad reasons.
We were talking about this fellow named Montparnasse, and he was a
boy.
French who hated the Spanish. He hated their guts. And, yeah, he pretty much everything he did was just to get revenge at the Spanish for killing his uncle in a war that happened. And torturing as many Spanish as he could find is pretty much his only goal. He wasn't worried about gold. He wasn't working for anybody. He was just killing as many Spanish as he could.
He was just a bad dude.
He was horrible. We were gonna talk about him, but then we didn't.
Yeah, we didn't because
because it's very dramatic.
He's
a horrible man.
Yeah, between Daniel Montparnasse and Francois Léolinis, I think that's how you pronounce his last name.
Close enough.
They were both really notorious. Like, you take Blackbeard, and Blackbeard was pretty bad. But then you get these two dudes, and it's a whole nother level.
It's, absolutely disgusting. And then you have, on the opposite extreme, you have those who are just sailors and are given a letter of marque to privateer. Is privateer a verb? I don't know. They were told to be privateer. Yeah, they were told to privateer. And then you have, like, I don't actually know if Jean-Francios Roberval got a letter of marque.
I don't think he did, because, I mean, it mentions that the king was just wink, wink, slap, slap.
But it seems as though he was wanting to help further this colony, and he wasn't the pinnacle of wonderfulness in a guy, but he was wanting to do it for good, sort of. So.
Yeah. Pirates and privateers are very interesting. I mean, there's an obvious difference. Like, one of them is a legal pirate, and the other one is illegal.
And I also think that there is a place for privateering. Like, in war. It makes sense to have.
It makes sense, yeah.
If you don't have enough Navy vessels, then to have... Can you call it guerrilla warfare when it's on the water? I don't know. But you have these people that can go in and do that. I don't know.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Pirates are.
And so, yeah, that's why we were doing this little bit of history on pirates is so that people know the difference between the Hollywood idea of what pirates are, which most people have in their heads nowadays is the Jack Sparrows and Will Turners of the world, and then what they really were, which is Montbars and Blackbeards and horrible murderers.
Yes.
So.
Yep. It's a wrap. Thank you for joining us, folks, and we'll see you next time.